Welcome to the shadowy crossroads where myth meets reality. In this video, we're diving into curses, those chilling whispers from folklore, tales passed down through generations. But are they just stories, or do they hold real power? We'll explore infamous cursed objects, historical cases that defy explanation, and the deep psychological toll curses can take on believers. From ancient legends to modern-day mysteries, we're unraveling the threads of fear, fate, and the mind. Whether skeptic or believer, prepare to question what you know. Hit subscribe, and let's journey into the darker side of human belief. This is Curses That Last. Ancient Egypt. The civilization of ancient Egypt, with its monumental pyramids, elaborate burial customs, and pantheon of gods, has always captivated historians and the general public alike. Perhaps one of the most sensational and enduring legends to emerge from Egyptology is the Curse of the Pharaohs, a supposed supernatural revenge inflicted upon those who dared to disturb the tombs of the ancient kings. Most famously associated with the discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, the curse has been blamed for a series of mysterious deaths and misfortunes. But how much truth lies behind this ancient legend? Is the curse a real force of vengeance, or is it simply a combination of coincidence, media hype, and misunderstood science? Let's explore the history, the myth, and the science behind the curse. 1. The historical context, Egypt's tombs and treasures. Ancient Egyptians believed deeply in the afterlife. The dead, especially pharaohs, were mummified and buried with elaborate rituals, surrounded by amulets, offerings, and personal belongings meant to ensure a successful journey into the next world. The tombs, like those found in the Valley of the Kings, were sealed to protect the deceased and their possessions for eternity. To safeguard the sanctity of these tombs, protective spells and warnings were often inscribed, especially around the entrance. While these were meant more for spiritual protection than literal threats, they contributed to the idea that the ancient dead might strike back if disturbed. Over the centuries, many tombs were looted, but some remained untouched, sealed in silence, mystery, and desert sand. 2. The discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb. In 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter made one of the most important discoveries in Egyptology, the nearly intact tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, a boy king who ruled for just 9 years, around 1332 to 1323 BCE. Backed by his patron Lord George Herbert, 5th Earl of Carnarvon, Carter opened the tomb in the Valley of the Kings after years of tireless searching. Inside the tomb lay over 5,000 priceless artifacts, including golden statues, jewelry, weapons, chariots, and the now iconic golden death mask of Tutankhamun. The tomb's chambers had lain undisturbed for over 3,000 years, until Carter's team breached them. Soon after, strange things began to happen. 3. The curse strikes. Early deaths and eerie events. Just a few months after the tomb was opened, Lord Carnarvon died in Cairo in April 1923. His cause of death was an infected mosquito bite that led to blood poisoning. Almost immediately, rumors began to swirl about an ancient curse claiming vengeance on tomb violators. Newspapers, especially British tabloids, ran sensational headlines. Death comes to the tomb raiders. Pharaoh's curse kills again. The idea caught on, and more deaths followed. George J. Gould, an American financier who visited the tomb, died of a fever shortly after. Archibald Douglas Reed, who took X-rays of Tutankhamun's mummy, died mysteriously. Sir Bruce Ingham, a friend of Carter's who received a mummified hand as a gift, had his house burned down, then flood. Arthur Mace, a member of the excavation team, died in 1928 after suffering health issues. In total, about a dozen deaths were attributed to the curse, though not all of them were directly connected to the tomb or even occurred shortly after the discovery. Interestingly, Howard Carter himself lived until 1939, 17 years after the tomb's opening, and died of natural causes. So if there was a curse, it seemed oddly selective. 4. Myth or media. How the legend grew. The Curse of the Pharaohs owes much of its staying power not to ancient writings, but to modern media and Western fascination with the exotic and mysterious. At the time of the tomb's discovery, the world was in a state of upheaval following World War I. People craved mystery, magic, and the unknown. Several factors helped feed the myth. A. Tabloid journalism. British and American newspapers competed for readership. Stories about haunted tombs and deadly curses sold better than dry archaeological reports. Some journalists even made up facts, like the claim that the tomb had an inscription reading, "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the king's peace." No such curse was ever found in Tutankhamun's tomb. B. Hollywood influence. Films like The Mummy, 1932, and its many remakes capitalized on the idea of ancient Egyptian revenge from beyond the grave. This blend of history and horror etched the curse into pop culture. C. Spiritualism and the occult. The 1920s also saw a surge of interest in spiritualism, seances, and the paranormal. The idea of curses aligned perfectly with public fascination in ghosts and life after death. 5. Scientific explanations, the curse debunked. Despite the intrigue, modern science offers rational explanations for many of the deaths and illnesses attributed to the curse. A. Toxins and mold. Ancient tombs are sealed environments. Over thousands of years, they can become breeding grounds for toxic substances such as Aspergillus flavus, a mold that can cause respiratory problems or even death when inhaled. Bacteria, like Pseudomonas or Staphylococcus, found on decaying bodies and tomb walls. Toxic gases, such as ammonia and formaldehyde, which can build up in enclosed spaces. Some experts believe that the early deaths, especially of people with weakened immune systems, could have resulted from exposure to these hidden biohazards. B. Coincidence and confirmation bias. Out of the dozens of people involved in the tomb's excavation, most lived long lives. In fact, a 2002 study published in the British Medical Journal compared the lifespans of those who entered the tomb versus those who didn't. The results showed no significant difference in mortality. The few who died early were often in poor health or had pre-existing conditions. But human psychology tends to remember dramatic patterns and assign meaning to coincidences. 6. Ancient beliefs about curses. It's true that the ancient Egyptians believed in protective magic and invoked divine wrath on tomb desecrators. Some tombs even included warnings like, "Cursed be those who disturb the rest of the pharaoh. They that shall break the seal of this tomb shall meet death by a disease that no doctor can diagnose." These were more religious deterrents than literal threats, meant to warn off robbers in a society where the afterlife was more real than the physical world. The idea of retribution by the gods aligned with their cosmic order known as Ma'at, which emphasized balance and justice. But these threats were not unique to Egypt. Many ancient cultures used similar warnings to protect graves, temples, and sacred spaces. 7. Modern interpretations, cultural fascination with death. The enduring legend of the Curse of the Pharaohs reveals more about modern society than ancient Egypt. We are drawn to the unknown. Ancient Egypt is distant, mysterious, and filled with cryptic symbols. Justice and revenge. The idea of a wronged king seeking posthumous justice appeals to our sense of fairness. Mortality. Stories of tomb curses force us to confront our fear of death, power, and the limits of human control. Moreover, the curse serves as a symbolic warning: some knowledge may come at a price. The tomb, once untouched, became a flashpoint for greed, fame, and myth-making. 8. The legacy of Tutankhamun's tomb. Despite the myth of the curse, the discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb remains a crowning achievement of archaeology. It unveiled a wealth of information about Egyptian burial practices, artistry, and royal life. Tutankhamun himself, once a minor figure in Egyptian history, became a global icon. Exhibitions of his treasures drew millions, and his golden mask remains one of the most recognized artifacts in the world. Ironically, the legend of the curse helped preserve interest in Egyptology and may have protected other tombs by discouraging amateur looters. Myth meets reality. The Curse of the Pharaohs is a fascinating blend of ancient belief, modern psychology, and cultural storytelling. While no scientific evidence supports a supernatural cause, the legend continues to thrive because it taps into something timeless: our curiosity about the past, our fear of the unknown, and our deep-seated respect for the dead. Whether viewed as a real phenomenon or a product of imagination, the curse reminds us of the power of story, the fragility of life, and the enduring legacy of a civilization that still whispers through the sands of time. European folklore. European folklore is a vast, complex web of belief systems, oral traditions, and mythic narratives that reveal the fears, hopes, and psychological underpinnings of centuries-old cultures. Among the most enduring themes are witch curses, the mystical significance of bloodlines, and the haunting concept of generational misfortune. These ideas are not only interconnected but serve as metaphors for inherited trauma, social ostracism, and the fragile boundary between the sacred and the profane. The witch is a figure of fear and power. In medieval and early modern Europe, the witch emerged as a deeply feared figure. She was often portrayed as a woman who had made a pact with the devil, wielded unnatural powers, and could disrupt social and natural order. But beneath this fear was also a grudging respect, a recognition of the witch's knowledge of herbs, healing, and the spiritual world. Witch curses, particularly, were a powerful motif. A curse wasn't just a fleeting misfortune, it could linger for generations, like a shadow cast over a family. The very idea that someone could speak calamity into existence and pass it down through bloodlines reflected both a spiritual worldview and the real-life consequences of social exclusion. Accusations of witchcraft often targeted women who were poor, widowed, or simply different. Their perceived ability to curse was a projection of communal anxiety. The curse, spoken word and lasting consequence. In folklore, curses often originate from a moment of emotional intensity, a scorned lover, a grieving mother, a wronged villager. The spoken curse was a potent act. Words had power, and when uttered with malice or sorrow, they were believed to penetrate the very fabric of fate. For example, in Scottish folklore, the Caoined, a lament or keening song, could be twisted into a curse. A grieving mother might wail not only in sorrow but in rage, damning the lineage of those responsible for her loss. In Germanic tales, a hex, from the German hex, meaning witch, could take root in a family and manifest as illness, madness, or bad luck for generations. In Eastern Europe, particularly in Slavic traditions, the prickliady, curse, was feared. A village elder or wise woman, often revered and feared in equal measure, could deliver a curse that would stick to the bones of a family. Miscarriages, poverty, mysterious deaths, these were seen not as coincidence but as evidence that a curse had taken root. Family bloodlines, the burden of inheritance. In many European folk traditions, bloodlines are sacred. Not just biologically, but spiritually. Who your ancestors were could determine your fortune, your fate, and your standing in the community. This belief, widespread across Celtic, Norse, and Slavic cultures, infused family histories with both pride and dread. In Irish folklore, geasa, singular, geis, were mystical obligations or taboos often passed down through generations. If broken, they could bring ruin. These were not necessarily curses but moral and magical constraints, a kind of inherited spiritual contract. A family might be bound to never speak a certain word, to avoid traveling in a particular direction, or to protect a sacred site. Violating the geis could invoke a familial downfall. Similarly, in Romanian folklore, particularly among the Carpathian communities, bloodlines were watched carefully for signs of tainted ancestry. The idea that a vampire, or strigoi, could be born into a family haunted many generations. If an ancestor had been a witch, a murderer, or had died unrepented, it was believed their soul might not rest, and their descendants would suffer spiritual repercussions. In noble families, particularly during the Renaissance and Enlightenment periods, stories circulated of inherited curses. These were often politically motivated tales designed to undermine the legitimacy of a rival house, but they took root in popular imagination. The idea that a family could be marked by fate made it easier to explain sudden ruin or endless tragedy. Generational misfortune, myth or metaphor. When a family experienced repeated tragedies, failed crops, early deaths, madness, it was often interpreted not as misfortune but as divine or magical retribution. In rural European communities where scientific understanding of genetics and psychology was limited, folklore filled in the gaps. In French provincial tales, particularly in Brittany, the concept of the damned line was common. A family might carry a mark, invisible to outsiders, that doomed them to sorrow. Often these marks were associated with an ancestral crime, murder, betrayal, incest. The idea was not just punishment, but moral consequence echoing through the ages. In Scandinavian lore, especially among the Norse and Sami people, Ætr, family line or clan, was a core concept. A Nyangar, coward or villain, could stain an entire bloodline. Descendants would carry the spiritual weight of his betrayal, cursed to die young, go mad, or live in exile. These tales reinforced communal ethics, showing that the consequences of dishonor outlived the individual. In these stories, misfortune was never random. It was a narrative, a thread weaving through generations. This helped communities make sense of suffering and reinforced social cohesion. If someone was cursed, it was either their fault or the result of inherited sin. Either way, it allowed people to compartmentalize tragedy. The role of nature and the supernatural. European folklore often binds family and fate to the land itself. Curses and misfortunes are not abstract, they manifest in the physical world. Cows stop giving milk. Children are born with strange birthmarks. Crops rot overnight. This blending of the supernatural and the natural underscores the folkloric belief in a world deeply interconnected, where spiritual and physical realms constantly interact. In alpine folklore, there are tales of families cursed by mountain spirits, Berggeister, for mining sacred stones or building too close to a fairy's grove. These transgressions could lead to landslides, infertile fields, or ghost sightings. In such tales, generational misfortune becomes not only a punishment but a cautionary tale about environmental and spiritual respect. The same is true in the Balkans, where families that disturbed graves or broke oaths were cursed to bear black water in their wells, symbolizing both spiritual corruption and physical illness. This reinforces a core belief: the supernatural is never far, and its consequences are tangible. Breaking the curse, redemption and rebirth. Folklore rarely leaves a curse unresolved. There's always a possibility, albeit a difficult one, for redemption. In many stories, a brave descendant can break the curse through sacrifice, truth-telling, or acts of kindness. This functions both as a narrative closure and a moral lesson: the sins of the past can be acknowledged, and fate can be rewritten. In Italian folklore, particularly from southern regions, families afflicted by curses often sought the aid of a strega buona, a good witch or folk healer. Through rituals, herbal remedies, and spiritual intervention, the curse could be lifted. These rituals usually involved naming the wrong, lighting candles for the dead, and sometimes making amends with the offended spirit. In Slavic traditions, a ritual called otkup, literally buying back, was practiced. The family would offer a symbolic payment to a local wise woman or priest to atone for ancestral guilt. This could be a chicken, a loaf of bread, or coins thrown into a river. The idea was not only spiritual cleansing but public acknowledgement of the misdeed. Even in Norse sagas, which are often grim and fatalistic, there is room for breaking the chain. The Icelandic sagas frequently depict sons who must avenge their fathers but also find ways to break cycles of vengeance through exile, marriage alliances, or the founding of new settlements, symbolic acts of starting anew. Witch curses and modern echoes. Today, we might understand these stories as metaphors for generational trauma, unhealed wounds passed down through parenting, culture, or silence. The language of curses mirrors our modern language of psychology: cycles of abuse, inherited guilt, family secrets. Interestingly, modern European communities still preserve fragments of these beliefs. In parts of Eastern Europe, people still wear protective talismans to ward off the evil eye, a cousin of the traditional curse. In rural Italy and Greece, some families still consult folk healers for malocchio, evil eye, or spiritual cleansing. Even in literature and film, the trope of a cursed family remains compelling, from Gothic novels to horror films. These modern echoes reveal something powerful: that the core human experiences of fear, guilt, identity, and hope are timeless. The idea that what happened generations ago can shape us today may not be strictly magical, but it is profoundly human. Witch curses, family bloodlines, and generational misfortune are more than just superstitions. They are narrative frameworks that helped people make sense of suffering, connect to their heritage, and impose moral structure on a chaotic world. These stories, born from centuries of oral tradition, still resonate because they tap into our deepest psychological fears and desires: to be free from the past, to find meaning in the present, and to secure a better future for those who come after us. In the end, whether we call it a curse, karma, or trauma, the lesson is the same: the past echoes in the present, and only by acknowledging it can we hope to break its grip. Indigenous beliefs. Across diverse indigenous cultures around the world, there is a deeply rooted understanding that the land is sacred and alive. Indigenous cosmologies, systems of belief that explain the origin and structure of the world, typically center the land as not just a resource, but as a living being imbued with spirit, memory, and power. When the land is desecrated or disrespected, indigenous traditions often hold that this may result in spiritual consequences. Among these consequences are land curses and spiritual retribution, which are understood not merely as folklore, but as real and active responses by spiritual entities or the land itself. This essay explores the concept of land curses and spiritual retribution in indigenous belief systems across the globe, with examples from Native American, Aboriginal Australian, Maori, and African indigenous traditions. It also examines how these beliefs are tied to cultural preservation, moral frameworks, and environmental stewardship. 1. The sacredness of land in indigenous worldviews. Before discussing land curses and spiritual retribution, it is crucial to understand the foundational indigenous view of land. For most indigenous cultures, land is not inert or property to be owned. It is an ancestor, a source of life, a spiritual being, and an entity that holds memory. In the Lakota, Sioux tradition, the land is referred to as Unsai Maka, or Grandmother Earth. The belief is that the earth gives life, nourishes all beings, and must be treated with respect and reciprocity. Similarly, Aboriginal Australians believe in the dreaming, a spiritual time when ancestral beings shape the world. These ancestral spirits still reside in the land, in rocks, rivers, trees, and mountains. From these perspectives, any act of disrespect or destruction towards the land is also an act against the ancestors and the spirit world. This violation may provoke a response from the spiritual realm, sometimes manifesting as a curse. 2. Land curses, definitions and functions. A land curse, in indigenous contexts, is a spiritual or supernatural consequence resulting from the violation of sacred lands, burial grounds, or traditional boundaries. These curses may be placed intentionally by spiritual leaders or may be considered automatic consequences enacted by the spirits of the land. Purposes of land curses include protection of sacred sites. Curses serve as deterrents against intrusion. Justice and balance. When wrongs are committed, curses restore spiritual equilibrium. Cultural memory. The threat or narrative of a curse often serves to pass down moral teachings to future generations. Unlike the Western notion of curses as superstition or folklore, in indigenous contexts, they are often practical and spiritual mechanisms for maintaining harmony between humans and the natural world. 3. Native American beliefs and curses. Many Native American tribes maintain the belief in the spiritual power of the land and the reality of curses. A well-known example is the concept of desecrating burial grounds. In tribes such as the Navajo, Hopi, and Lakota, burial grounds are considered sacred. Disturbing these places may result in illness, misfortune, or spiritual hauntings. The Curse of Tippecanoe is a historical legend that some attribute to the Shawnee leader Tecumseh. Following the battle at Tippecanoe in 1811 and the desecration of Shawnee territory, it is said that a curse was placed upon U.S. presidents elected in years divisible by 20. Many presidents from 1840 to 1960 died in office under mysterious or violent circumstances, giving rise to belief in this curse. Whether or not one believes in the literal curse, it speaks to how spiritual retribution is woven into historical memory and resistance. Moreover, the Lakota opposition to the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline at Standing Rock was not just a political or environmental protest. It was deeply spiritual. Elders warned that disturbing the land and water would bring misfortune not only to the area but to all those involved. For many, the droughts, pipeline leaks, and unusual weather afterward were seen as evidence of spiritual retribution. 4. Aboriginal Australian land and retribution. Aboriginal Australians possess one of the oldest continuous cultures on Earth, with beliefs that are inextricably tied to the land. The Dreaming, or Chukurpa, outlines the moral laws and spiritual stories of the world's creation. Sacred sites connected to ancestral beings are highly protected, and disturbing them can invoke serious spiritual consequences. One notable belief is in the concept of makarata, a form of justice or retribution. If sacred sites are desecrated, it is believed that the ancestral spirits may exact vengeance in the form of illness, misfortune, or natural disaster. For example, the desecration of Uluru, a sacred rock formation, has long been accompanied by stories of misfortune. Tourists who took rocks from Uluru as souvenirs often report experiencing bad luck, illness, or financial ruin until they return the stones, which are mailed back every year with apologies. These beliefs function not just as religious or mystical experiences but also as guardians of sacred spaces. The fear of retribution helps preserve cultural heritage in the absence of legal enforcement. 5. Maori beliefs and tapu. In Maori culture of Aotearoa, New Zealand, the concept of tapu, sacred or restricted, plays a central role in understanding land and spiritual consequences. When a place or object is tapu, it is spiritually protected, often because it contains the presence of ancestors or has been consecrated through rituals. Violating tapu can result in wakama, shame, illness, or even death, not just to the individual but sometimes to their descendants. Such spiritual retribution is not always immediate but can unfold over time. Healing from these transgressions often requires the intervention of a tohunga, spiritual healer, and the performance of cleansing rituals. One example is the sacred mountain Taranaki. It is believed that those who remove stones from the mountain or disrespect the land may suffer severe consequences. Like Uluru, many tourists have mailed back stolen stones after experiencing misfortune, attributing it to breaking tapu. These beliefs are deeply entrenched in Maori social and environmental ethics. They help instill a sense of responsibility toward the land and towards past and future generations. 6. African indigenous traditions and ancestral wrath. In many African indigenous religions, land is seen as a bridge between the living, the ancestors, and the gods. Sacred groves, rivers, and burial grounds are considered highly potent spiritual places. Desecrating these spaces is seen as an affront to the ancestors, who are not passive spirits but active agents in the lives of the living. Among the Yoruba people, for instance, sacred groves are home to Orisha spirits. Unauthorized entrance or destruction of these spaces may provoke the wrath of the spirits, resulting in misfortune, infertility, or spiritual possession. Traditional priests, Babalawo, are often consulted to determine if a curse has been triggered and how to perform the necessary rituals for atonement. Similarly, in parts of Ghana and Nigeria, it is believed that land tied to family ancestors must be honored. Selling or misusing ancestral land without proper rituals can result in ancestral punishment, including madness, death, or persistent misfortune in a family line. These beliefs serve as powerful deterrents and mechanisms for upholding intergenerational respect and land ethics. 7. The role of spiritual retribution in cultural survival. Spiritual retribution, including land curses, is not only a religious phenomenon. It is a form of resistance and survival. Many indigenous communities faced colonization, land dispossession, and cultural erasure. In the face of this, spiritual beliefs have provided a way to maintain sovereignty, assert moral authority, and protect sacred places. In some cases, the belief in land retribution serves to dissuade further exploitation. For example, indigenous activists may invoke curses or spiritual warnings to deter companies from mining or deforestation. These are not idle threats but expressions of indigenous law, an assertion that the land has agency and will not suffer in silence. Even among younger generations, these beliefs continue to resonate. Many indigenous youth reclaim these stories and rituals not just as superstitions, but as powerful cultural and environmental teachings. 8. Misinterpretation and appropriation. It is important to note that mainstream media and popular culture often misrepresent indigenous beliefs about curses and retribution. These concepts are sometimes trivialized, exoticized, or reduced to horror tropes. This diminishes their real cultural and spiritual significance. Moreover, there have been instances where non-indigenous people have appropriated these beliefs for profit, such as using sacred sites for tourism or marketing cursed items online. This not only disrespects the beliefs themselves but can lead to further spiritual harm, according to many indigenous traditions. Respectful engagement with these concepts requires understanding their context and the deep relationship indigenous peoples maintain with the land. It also means listening to indigenous voices, elders, and spiritual leaders who are the custodians of this knowledge. Conclusion. Land curses and spiritual retribution are not merely myths or superstitions, they are profound expressions of indigenous spirituality, ethics, and environmental consciousness. They reflect the belief that land is not separate from humanity but is part of a living web of relationships involving ancestors, spirits, and future generations. These beliefs serve as mechanisms of justice, protection, and moral instruction. They challenge modern extractive ideologies and remind us of the consequences of living out of balance with nature. As the world confronts ecological crises, there is much to learn from indigenous perspectives that view land not just as a commodity, but as sacred and sentient. In honoring these beliefs, we are called not only to respect indigenous traditions but to reconsider our own relationship with the earth. Because in the indigenous worldview, when the land suffers, so too do we all, and the spirits are always watching. Thanks for venturing into the eerie world of curses with us. From age-old folklore to chilling real-life accounts and the psychological shadows they cast, curses continue to haunt our imagination. Do they truly hold power, or is it all in the mind? Let us know what you believe in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into the mysterious and macabre, give us a like, share with fellow thrill seekers, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and beware, some curses are said to last forever.